My name is Adil Heather, and I am the AAS President-elect. And probably the most important honor that the President-elect has is to introduce our President, Dr. Rebecca Sippel. I want to start with a story, and this actually happened right here in Jacksonville. And it actually happened a couple of nights ago in a bar. And one of our Australian friends, who's dear to many of us, asked me the question. He's like, actually somebody said to him, one of my friends in Australia asked me, why do you Americans make such a big deal about your presidents? Why do you have to talk about their academic accomplishments, their millions in dollars of funding, their hundreds and hundreds of publications? Basically, why are you Americans such show-offs? And is Richard here? I've been thinking about it, Richard, and here's why we do this. It's not just to talk about all these quantitative academic accomplishments, but what we'd want to do is present a qualitative assessment of what it takes to become a leader of this organization. And it's really to inspire our medical students and trainees. In fact, I don't even want to call them medical students, I want to call them future presidents, to understand what it takes to have this kind of impact. And I hope over the next 10 to 12 minutes, I'll talk about the grit, innovation, love for family, and teaching, which are the key words that I've learned about regarding Becky Sippel as I got to interview her family and friends for this discussion. Now, to understand Becky, you have to go to where she was born. She was born in Waukesha and then quickly moved to a small town in rural Wisconsin. Her graduating class had 90 kids in high school. She is a true local celebrity. This is not a town where people are flashy or they like to show off, but she has done something so important that she has been honored with being on the Wall of Fame in her hometown. That's a really big deal, and just that requires a round of applause for Becky. Now, she displayed this grit from the start. Her mom, Kathy, who's in the front row here, relayed this incident to me. When she was 4 or 5 years old, Kathy was trying to teach Becky how to ride a bike, and Becky just couldn't get it. There was a big hill outside the house, and she could not get over it, or actually couldn't come down it. So Mom said, you know what, maybe you can't ride a bike, we're just gonna give up. But Becky would not come inside the house. She stayed out there herself until she self-taught herself how to ride a bike, and only after she conquered that hill did she come into the home. She brought this to everything she did. In her 5th grade, she was asked to fill in this map of the United States. All she had to do is take this map and fill it in with all the states that are in there. But Becky, this wasn't good enough for her. So she wrote a letter. Remember, this is before the age of the internet. She wrote a letter to the tourism office of every single state, got reams of information about each state, and then used that to populate the map that she made. And that map still hangs in her grade school today. Now, in her high school, she got the chance to visit Australia, and this is going to become important in the later part of the talk. As Kathy was relaying this to me, when she was in Australia, she was loved by all. In fact, her host mother in Australia called Kathy and said, can we just switch? You can keep Kate in America, she's kind of more American, and Becky can stay here in Australia. Now, if you see what Becky says in this newspaper article about her, this is as she was the best student in her high school. She says, I'm not the smartest, therefore I have to work the hardest. Again, that humility and grit that has been the hallmark of her success. And of course, successful she is. She was the valedictorian of her high school, and throughout her entire high school career, only had 1 A-. And that A- was, in fact, despite her great cheerleading career, was in physical education. Now, she planned to walk in the footsteps of her dad and her brother, Dennis, who are pharmacists. And that's why she went to Drake University. She achieved every honor at Drake University, as you can see. But while she was there, her brother encouraged her to pursue a career in medicine. And she quickly changed her major and became pre-med. During her time at Drake is when she began to do research and started her journey as a true innovator. This is her presenting research work as a college undergrad. And that innovation continues till today. I had the opportunity to sit through grand rounds while she visited the Brigham and Women's Hospital last year. And yes, Becky, I'm wearing the same socks with the AAS emblem on them for you. And what she described during her grand rounds was that she loves to operate. She's a technically amazing surgeon. Everybody will tell you this. In fact, Susan Pitt wrote me a whole email about how awesome she is in the OR, right? But despite being this great surgeon, she's like, maybe these central node dissections that we do for a specific type of thyroid cancer, maybe they're not needed. Maybe they actually harm the patient. So we should do a randomized controlled trial to figure that out. Now, the dogma is against that. And most people told her, you can't do it. But of course, Becky, having the grit and innovation, said, no, I'm going to figure out a way to do it. And in fact, not only figured out a way, but got a trial funded with an R01 level of funding to be able to do that. Now, back at Drake, she achieved, as I mentioned, every honor, including the Drake Relay Hostess, which is a really, really big deal. But more importantly, that's where she met Ryan, who has been her partner. And in talking to you, Ryan, over the past few weeks, putting this together, I wasn't surprised when we heard from Dr. Rickers about how you helped him the first time you ever met him. You're just a great, helpful guy who helped me out as well. So let's give a round of applause for Ryan. Thank you so much for everything you've done. Now, they married in 1999, but even before they got married, Becky had moved to Washington University, St. Louis for her medical school. She again achieved every single honor possible at Washington University Medical School, and then was highly recruited by every residency program in the country. Here's a picture of her on graduation with her grandparents, and that's a picture from match day. Now, she's just about to open the envelope. Please note where Ryan is sitting. He's sitting on this side in this picture, and then something amazing happens that he has to now be on this side. I don't know if they're crying or excited or what's going on, but certainly this was an exciting time. Now, Becky chose, of all of her choices, to go back to Wisconsin because she knew about the culture of the program, and more importantly, she had this deep love for her state and for family. She is a great Packers fan and, in fact, owns a share in the Packers, right? So she really wanted to be in Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, as Herb Chen, who kindly gave me a couple of slides, she again achieved every single honor possible, right? Nearly 20 publications, highest AppSite scores, anything you can imagine. But as I was talking about what makes her really tick, the most important decision she did was this one. She was only the second person in the Wisconsin surgical residency to decide to have a child while being a surgical resident. Remember, this is a long time ago when she chose to do it. And she read her people and her place very correctly. Attila the Hun would be proud, Dr. Rickers, because when their first child, Aiden, was born in 2005, nobody was more excited than the chair of surgery, because that's the kind of spirit that embodied that program and what she was trying to do. She then went for a stint at the University of California in San Francisco for training in her fellowship in endocrine surgery, and then came back to Wisconsin as a faculty member and has been there ever since. They've created a beautiful life, her and Ryan, with their two great sons, Aiden and Gavin, who are right here in the front row. Beautiful suits, by the way, guys. And they're true Wisconsin kids. They love doing things together. Becky always makes time for her family. We all know how busy she is. We all know she's the first to respond to an email. She's the most, detail-oriented person you can imagine, but she always makes time for her children. They even own a beautiful lake home that they spend time at in the summers, and Becky, despite her very busy schedule, figures out a way to drive up there on the weekends and spend time with her family. Now, she's devoted to her entire family. This picture here is with her brother, her sister-in-law, her parents, their children, and most importantly, we got to meet Emily, who you can see here in this picture. That's Emily, her niece's confirmation. And when we were at when she was representing the AAS as president in Peru, she brought Emily, who had just finished high school, to Peru with her as a high school graduation president. I wish I had an aunt like that. Now, this love for family extends beyond her blood relatives to the people she works with. She was, in fact, the first resident to work in Herb Chen's lab. Now, that in itself takes a lot of courage, right? But she and Herb have developed an amazing partnership together, and probably, maybe they developed this whole sense of camaraderie and teamship and teamwork. And you can see that in everything that she's done and how she's taught her mentees, and her partners. They would send me countless emails about how she would stay late in the OR or help them with a patient, even though she wasn't on call. And the reason why she is so revered and has won every single teaching award you can imagine is because she genuinely cares about the people she works with. Look at the tweets. It's about somebody graduating. It's about traveling to somebody's wedding far away to celebrate more than what they just do in the OR, but who they are as a person. And we at the AAS have truly benefited from everything that she's done. She's inspired me. She's inspired our entire executive council. This is from our retreat earlier in the summer, where she did an amazing job trying to improve us and our ability to grow and improve our organization. I asked our great executive director for some statistics about Becky's contributions to the AAS. And don't look at just the quantitative contributions in all the committees and the officer positions. Look at what Ms. Kassendorf put at the bottom. Her dedication and deep commitment has positioned the AAS as a well-respected and innovative influence in academic surgery. She truly is one who makes a difference. And she's known for her positive disposition. These are other tweets. You can see all that she does. She makes the room shine when she walks in. And she doesn't only do that. Today, we're all going to, at least the AAS active members are going to begin voting for our new leadership between 12 and 4 p.m. today. That was all Becky's idea, because she saw a problem. She wanted to make it easier for everybody, so she created this electronic voting system for us. But she is a whole lot of fun and is the life of the party. And I think you'll see her on the dance floor again tonight making all of this happen. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope over the last 10 to 12 minutes, I've been able to show to you that with her grit, her innovation, her love for family, and her great ability to teach, our president, Dr. Rebecca Sippel, is a gift to the AAS, surgery, and humanity.
Just a small town girl living in a lonely world.
We definitely have to change the slides. The sooner we get that off there, the better. Thanks. Great. It is a true privilege for me to be standing on this podium today as the 50th president of our association. You know, as Adil sort of highlighted, the AAS has really played an instrumental role. Oh, is my microphone on? Okay. An instrumental role in my early academic career. You know, I got involved in it very early. As a resident, I attended the first Fundamentals of Surgical Research course, and I quickly, as a faculty member, got engaged in it. And I really, through my involvement, my service has had the privilege of working with some truly amazing individuals. Through my involvement in this executive council, I've had the honor of working with 8 of our past presidents of this organization. And over this past year, I've had the privilege of working with Otto, Carl, Cliff, and Eugene. These people are truly amazing individuals, and they continually inspire me because of their amazing accomplishments. And what I've learned is that these people all have completely unique strengths and gifts, and that the path that they took to get to the leadership of this organization is very different. And what they've showed me is that there is not one pathway to achieving success in academic surgery. But what I've also learned from being in the AAS is that the power and the strength of our organization is not the people on the slides, it's the people in the audience. Every person that I have encountered in this organization, every committee member, every person who's shown here to present their work has so much potential and so much capacity. And I think that that youth and that energy is what drives our organization and really helps to show us where we're going to take this in the future. You know, I think one of the things that I really loved about the AAS is that I've never been part of an organization that is so on mission. When we had a strategic retreat a few years ago, we sat together in a room and we tried to develop a mission statement. And we came up with this: inspiring and developing young academic surgeons. And this is exemplified in everything that we do as an organization. And this is something that I am truly passionate about, and that is why I've wanted to serve this organization. So as I sit here today as a president, I had to think, you know, what can I possibly say today? What can I share with you that is going to help potentially do this, help to inspire and develop some of the young academic surgeons in the room today? So what I thought I would do is I would tell you my story. You know, not just any story, but I wanted to share the path that I've taken in my life to get me here on the stage today. And Otto showed a very rosy picture of what that story is. And a lot of the things we're going to talk about are different, but I want to show you my own insights. And what I want to share with you more particularly is the insights that that pathway has taught me in my career and what I've learned from it. Because now, if I could look back, if I could be at the stage of many of you out in the seats today, the things I wish I knew. And it is my hope that at least some part of my story will resonate with you and that you'll all leave this room just with a little bit different perspective on how you look at achieving success in academic surgery. So, as Adel implied, the road to medical school that I took is very similar to many people in this room. I was a top achiever. Let's be honest, I was an overachiever. I didn't know what to do unless I did it perfect, and I just worked as hard as I could and wanted to be the best at everything that I did. I didn't understand what good enough was because nothing was good enough. There was only perfection, and I worked the hardest I could to achieve every goal. And that pays off, right? That's the ticket to getting into medical school. That's what we all have to do in order to make that benchmark. And so it worked. I got into medical school. And then once I was there, I knew I wanted to make a difference. I initially thought I wanted to be an endocrinologist. I loved endocrine physiology. I thought it was fascinating. And I knew I hated procedures, and the sight of blood made me pass out. So I was pretty certain that nothing involving procedures, but I wanted to be an endocrinologist because I thought, you know, endocrinologists are thinkers and problem solvers, and that's me. So I'm going to be an endocrinologist. And then I went to my third-year rotation, and I was shocked because I fell in love with it. And I didn't know what to do because this wasn't what I was supposed to do. This was not part of my plan. I was not supposed to like surgery, but I ended up really liking it. And thankfully for me at that time, there was a faculty member at Washington University, Jeff Moley, who was an endocrine surgeon. And I learned from Dr. Moley that there was this field called endocrine surgery. And then when I thought about it, everything I really liked about endocrine was actually a surgical problem. And that really, if I did endocrine surgery, it was like endocrinology without the diabetes part, which was like a win-win for me. So then the epiphany came, and I said, really, this path was really perfect for me. So the stars all aligned, and that surgery and endocrine could come together. I also had some really great mentorship while I was at WashU. I had the privilege of working, my mentor as a medical student was Dr. Nat Soper, who many of you know here as a leader of our field, and Dr. Greg Sicard. And they taught me about the passion of pursuing a career in general surgery and also the passion about doing research and developing a career in academic surgery. So when I left residency, I knew I wanted to be an endocrine surgeon and that I wanted to pursue a career in academic surgery. So when you're making that decision about where to go for residency, you know, there's a lot of things you have to factor in. And I think that Adel highlighted things that I thought were important to me. And I think one of the things that I really valued was culture. You know, I had been told by many people during my training that I was too nice to be a surgeon, that I couldn't choose that because it wasn't the right fit for me. And I really didn't think that that should exclude me from becoming a surgeon. And so what I wanted to do was find a program that would embrace who I was and my personality and wouldn't try to change who I was. The other thing that I had to factor in is at that time my dad was sick. He had had a massive heart attack when I was in college. He was diagnosed with MS. And I knew he wasn't going to be around for a long time. And I figured 7 years is a long time to be away from your family. And you don't have a lot of time to, as a resident, to travel back to visit family or to take care of sick parents. And I just knew that for my own well-being, I needed to be close to family at that stage in my life. Thankfully for me, the chairman of the Department of Surgery at Wisconsin at that time was Dr. Leighton Rickers. And as I talked about earlier, Dr. Rickers had really created that culture at Wisconsin that just resonated with me. As soon as I came to interview there for my residency, it was very clear that this is where I belonged. It was more like a family. It wasn't competitive, it was supportive, and I knew that that environment was where I was gonna thrive. It was the type of people I wanted to be around, and they were gonna allow me to achieve everything I wanted to achieve. So ironically, I came to Wisconsin knowing full well I wanted to be an endocrine surgeon. And at that time, Wisconsin didn't really have an endocrine surgery program. But you know, sometimes I think fate steps in and opportunities are created. Or maybe Dr. Rickers realized that's what I was really looking for, because ironically, my first year at UW, Dr. Rickers recruited a young faculty member from Johns Hopkins. He also had Wisconsin roots and had written him a letter and said he was interested in coming back to Wisconsin and wanted to start an endocrine surgery program. Dr. Rickers didn't have a position posted. He wasn't really interested in building an endocrine surgery program. But when he saw the CV of this young individual, he said, sometimes you see a CV and you just know that they're gonna accomplish great things. And so he offered him a job. And so lucky for me, that was my intern year at UW when Dr. Chen arrived. And I think he had been at UW for maybe a month or two, and I came knocking on his door as a young intern, and I said, I'm an intern, I want to be an endocrine surgeon, and I want to work in your lab. And, you know, Herb was pretty excited. He's a brand new faculty member. If he can get a resident, great. So we were very excited after that conversation. This was going to be amazing. We were going to work together. We were going to accomplish all these things. The department, not so excited, because he was a first-year faculty. He hadn't gotten any major extramural funding, and they said he wasn't ready. He can't take on a resident yet. He's not prepared. And so we fought. That was worth the ticket, Dr. Rickers. I played my tickets with my program director, and I went in there. I think Dr. Chen might have played some tickets too, and we fought, and we said, no, this is what we both want, and we want to make this commitment. And we don't care if he's too new of a faculty member. This is going to work, and this is what's best for both of us. And it happened. So as they said, I was the first person to join Dr. Chen's lab, and literally, he had to train me how to do tissue culture himself because he didn't have anybody. He had a tech that had worked for the summer. So I literally kind of transitioned and got his lab started. I know that Cooney, his first lab scientist, is here today. I actually had to help train his PhD scientist when he joined the lab. I had no experience and I had no idea what I was doing, but somehow, because I had been taught by Dr. Chen, I was able to pass on those skills. I had this expertise. But it was an amazing formative years for me because he taught me the nuts and bolts of how to do research, all the basic skills I need, and he taught me how to write my first abstract, my first paper. I mean, I was a complete novice when I came in, and by the end of that 2 years, I had 15 publications and had given 11 national presentations. He really helped to teach me the fundamentals of what I needed to be success in academic surgery. But I think what he also did for me, which was really phenomenal, is that he introduced me to the field of endocrine surgery. He made a very concerted effort that every meeting I went to, every presentation I gave, he figured out who the endocrine surgeons were in the room, and he made sure that he came up and introduced me to them and made sure that they knew who I was. And so I think that one of the things that Dr. Chen has a true gift in is that he is a true sponsor. He was a sponsor for my academic career from very day one, and I'm incredibly grateful for those opportunities. So after my training at Wisconsin, I knew that I wanted to come back to Wisconsin to join the faculty, and there was a lot of decisions about whether I should do a fellowship or not. I had had great clinical training, I had had great research training, I didn't really need the fellowship, But I also thought that if I was going to come back on faculty, it was really important that I go elsewhere, learn something else, and then come back so that I could add something to what the program already had, so I could somehow help to differentiate myself. And I chose to go to UCSF. And I had the honor of working with Dr. Orlo Clark, Kwan Du, and Electron Kababu, who are really just amazing, passionate endocrine surgeons. And they taught me some really interesting things when I was there. What they taught me is that to be a good endocrine surgeon, I needed to first and foremost be a really good endocrinologist. They didn't care what patient saw them, whether they were worked up, not worked up, if they just had a non-surgical problem. They really prided themselves on being endocrinologists first and foremost, who happened to offer surgical solutions. And I really took that to heart, and I think that that's what helps define us as a specialty, is that we are not just the technical operators of doing a technical operation, but we really understand the disease process from start to finish. And I think that that's something I've carried through from my training there. The other thing that they inspired in me is that if I really was passionate about improving care for patients, the very best way that I could do that was to do research. And I think that that statement is what got me motivated to do research and why I continue to do research today. I don't do research because I love the methodologies or I'm just so fascinated by the numbers or the calculations. I do it because research is a vehicle for me to improve the care of my patients every day. So thankfully, during my training, Dr. Chen was able to build a phenomenal endocrine surgery program, both a clinical program and a research program at UW. And when I was done, they were able to recruit me back home to my home state. When I started on faculty, Dr. Rickers hired me back to join the faculty, and then Dr. Kent came as the chair, and Dr. Chen was my partner, and then ultimately my division chief. I really had just amazing opportunities and support. I really feel like I was a kid in the candy store. Basically, every opportunity that I could possibly want or need was made available to me. I really felt like these people had created the keys to success for me. And so when I arrived, I just wanted so badly to be successful in academic surgery. And so I just took every opportunity that came my way. Anything somebody asked me, oh, I'll do that, I'll do that, I'll do that. And I gave it 110% effort because I wanted to prove that I had value and worth and that I could contribute to what I was doing. And so I did that, and it worked. And I was working really hard and accomplishing a lot of things. I think the problem was, too, is that I was in a division of two. And no offense, Herb, but it's really hard to live in your shadow. You know, I was so hard. How am I possibly going to differentiate myself from Herb Chen? He's so good at everything. And so I was like, well, maybe if I just keep working harder, or I keep doing more, I'll somehow be able to differentiate myself. You know, ultimately, I just kept figuring out how to do it all. Some people might say I had mastered the secret of figuring out how to do it all. When I look at sometimes what I was accomplishing, it was a little bit overwhelming. But as you're trying to juggle all these things, you're trying to accomplish it, at some point, something's got to give. And I realized very quickly that as much as I could do anything, I can't do everything. So as I started trying to keep up with the volume of demands that were coming to me, I started to have a very clear realization that despite all my powers, there are only 24 hours in a day, and that no matter what I did, I can't make more than 24 hours in a day. And so I realized that with the volume of things that I was being asked to do and the opportunities that were being presented, which all seemed amazing and I couldn't possibly turn them down, I simply couldn't get it done. There was no way that I was going to be able to continue to do the things that I was being asked at the quality that I wanted to give it. And unless I wanted to start compromising quality, there was no way that I was going to be able to be sustained. I realized at that point that quality was a core value to me, and I just couldn't let myself compromise quality for quantity. I kept thinking if I could just work harder, I could get it all done. You know, because we're surgeons, and so we never want to admit weakness. So, you know, I trained prior to the 80-hour work week. You know, I think my record was like 174 hours in a week. You know, I can work harder. Who needs sleep? Who needs exercise? Who needs to eat? Who needs to take care of themselves? So I just kept working harder and harder and harder so that I could try to get it all done. But the reality was I was drowning, and I couldn't find a life raft. I think I probably hit the lowest point about 4 years ago. I had been invited to Australia as a guest lecturer. I was going to be giving the postgraduate course in endocrine surgery. It's an amazing opportunity. I'm passionate about endocrine surgery. I love teaching, and it's in Australia. Even better part is it was in June and the kids were out of school. So I said, this is an opportunity I have to take. And I'm not just gonna go into this, I'm gonna bring the family and we're gonna make this the vacation of a lifetime. So I'm gonna take 3 weeks and we're gonna travel the country and it's gonna be amazing. So we did that. And in all the preparation, I realized, that's right, they actually asked me to give 4 talks too. So I'm not sure when I was getting those done, and in the rush of trying to get everything ready for this trip, I got them started. I got lots of them done, but I was not finishing them. And I was literally like trying to scramble the night before, trying to finish the talk that I had to give the very next morning. And I think that at one point, I was literally sitting there at 3 in the morning, writing a talk that I was gonna be giving at 8 o'clock the next morning. And my husband got out of bed and he came into the room and he looked at me and he's like, Becky, what are you doing? You're killing yourself. You cannot keep doing this. What are you doing to yourself? And he was right. I had kind of hit rock bottom. I was at a point that was completely unsustainable. I had been trying to tread water and stay afloat for so long, and I had finally gotten to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore. Unless I was willing to cut corners or drop things or drop the ball or not meet expectations, I just couldn't keep up with the volume. And so I looked at my husband and I said, I promise I'm gonna make changes. When we get home from this trip, I am gonna come home and I'm gonna look at what I'm gonna do and I'm gonna make some reprioritization. I'm gonna get some of the things off my plate. I'm gonna try to get better control of my life, I promise. So after that, I felt better, and we did go on, and after I gave those talks and everything went well, we had the vacation of a lifetime. The kids will agree. They got to feed kangaroos and pet koalas and go to rugby matches. We got to snorkel at the Great Barrier Reef. We even got to visit that family that I had lived with when I was in high school. And it was really amazing because we got to go visit the farm in rural New South Wales, and the kids got to herd sheep and cattle and see wild kangaroos. It really was a dream trip. Unfortunately, on that trip, a little sooner than I had planned, a life-changing event happened for me. I was about to leave the family that I had been staying with, that I had lived with in high school, and they were about to take us to the airport, and we had stopped at a coffee shop so they could say goodbye to the extended family. And I wanted to get a picture because I wanted to remember that moment. So I went to the trunk of the car to grab my camera, and so I could come out and take a picture. The driver forgot that I was behind the car, didn't realize I was there, and he took off. And he was taking a piece of farm equipment in for repairs. And so I was knocked to the ground, and a 2,000-pound tractor ran over my head. I was unconscious, kind of a bloody mess on the floor, and was transferred to the local emergency room. My husband and family were with me. I don't remember any of it. It was at that moment I was incredibly grateful for my AAS friends, because thankfully Ryan was able to connect with Dr. Richard Haney, who was mentioned earlier, who was a friend that I'd met through the AAS. And Richard immediately got in contact with the emergency room and realized that I needed a neurosurgeon and they didn't have the capabilities, and arranged a medical transport for me to his hospital in Sydney at Westmead. So I was transferred by helicopter thanks to Richard's coordination. As I laid there for the next 3 days unconscious, I wasn't aware of what was going on, but my family was. And I feel sorry for my husband every day for just sitting there wondering, because I asked him what they were told, and he was told at one point they didn't know if I would regain any meaningful function. And they were told that he should be prepared. I may be in a persistent vegetative state. Thankfully, 3.5 days later, I opened my eyes. And when I opened my eyes, at the end of the bed, I saw these 2 adorable little boys and that amazing husband standing there. And I realized that I hadn't died and I was still alive and that I was given a second chance. It's very funny when that happens, because you would think at that point I would wonder, where am I? What's happened? Why do I have a breathing tube? What's going on? And none of that crossed my mind. I didn't ask questions. I didn't even care. I just knew internally that I had been given a second chance, that somebody thought my time on this planet was not over, and that I had a life to live, and that life involved supporting these people. And so at that moment, I had a very aha moment and realized that I had no choice, but I had to make some serious changes in my life and start to reprioritize things. So I think that moment taught me is that we all need to appreciate what we have before it turns into what we had. I always prided myself on being able to do it all. At this point, I didn't want to do it all, and there was no way I could do it all. As much as when I returned to the United States, I wanted to believe that I was back to myself, I really wasn't. And so I knew that there was no way that I was going to be able to do what I used to do. And so I had to stop, and I had to make some changes, but I didn't know how to do that. You know, the reality was, as much as I didn't want to admit it, I had suffered a pretty severe traumatic brain injury. And as much as I wanted to pretend that everything was just the same, I had some pretty serious deficits in my working memory, and I had a much slower processing speed. And I actually had a bunch of physical injuries, even though I like to pretend that I didn't. I think I had over 20 fractures. I had broken ribs, broken clavicle, I had a broken hand, I had an ulnar nerve injury. I had some physical things that I probably needed to give myself a little bit of chance to recover. But unfortunately, because I'm a surgeon, I come back from Australia, and I think we had a faculty event 1 week after I arrived, and I showed up because I wanted to show everybody that I was still good. I was so worried that I was going to lose face or that people were going to hear about this and then think that I was brain damaged and label me as that. And so I showed up at that first faculty function, and I just pretended that everything was really good and I was doing great. I realized I had a real talent for doing that, just pretending that I am okay every day and not really admitting what was going on the inside. The reality is after a few weeks, I realized that as much as I could pretend that everything was okay and I didn't need time to recover, that I actually had a long road to recovery, and I needed to give myself the time to heal. And so I decided to take 6 months off from my practice to really allow me to focus on the time to recover from that accident. I had to take a time at that time to sort of pause and reflect a moment to really think about what was most important to me, what I cared about most, and how I was going to make some changes in my life. You know, I think the first thing I had to do is I actually had to come up a list of what I was doing right now. I don't know how many of you could easily come up with this list, but I was so overcommitted, I wasn't even sure how many balls I had in the air at that point. So I actually had to sit down on a piece of paper and I had to write it all down. And you know what? The list was overwhelming. I remember looking at it, and I brought it in to meet with Herb, and he's like, "What the heck are you doing? How are you possibly doing this all?" And I said, "I don't know. I wasn't doing it all. That was the problem." So I had just gotten myself, because I kept saying yes to things and not recognizing what I was doing, that I was clearly doing too much. So then what I had to do is I had to look at that list, and I had to figure out, how am I possibly going to prioritize this? So I had to look at the list, and I had to figure out what matters most. What on this list do I really care about? What is important to me? What do I prioritize? And more importantly, what is most important right now? We have different stages in our lives and our careers, and I really had to think, not just what do I think is important in general, but what right now at this stage of my career is really important. Because as much as I was prepared to take a little bit of time away, I didn't want to make that 6 months make changes that would completely alter the course of my life forever. And so I wanted to make sure that I kept at least some things going so that this one period and this one accident wouldn't define my entire life. So what I did is I created 3 lists. I looked at everything on that list and I tried to divide it into 3 columns. And in list 1 was everything I was passionate about. This was the stuff that was really important to me. This is the stuff that was core to me. This was the stuff that got me up in the morning, kept me up late at night, and I just couldn't imagine living without it. It was core to who I was. The second list was things that I thought were important. I definitely saw that they had value, but I also recognized that these are things that were not critical to this moment in time. It was okay that if I stepped away, I could come back and do it again in the future at some other time, but it was okay that if I wasn't doing it right at this exact moment. These were the things that I thought it was okay to put the pause button on. And then list 3 was the list of things that maybe at some point were a step to something or taking me in some direction, but right now I looked at that list and I wasn't sure why I was doing it or where it was taking me. It seemed like it was taking up a lot of time and energy, but I wasn't really even sure why I was doing it anymore. And honestly, most of this thing was just because of this commitment that once I say I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna follow through on it. So a lot of this were commitments that I had made previously, and now it really wasn't a direction I wanted to go anymore, but I just didn't want to back away from commitments. So I just wanted to finish what I had started. So now that I had the 3 lists, I at least had a better structure to sort of say, this is what I'm doing and this is what I care about. And what I did is I went to list 3 and I resigned from everything. I sent a very polite email and I said, thank you very much for the opportunity. Right now I don't have the capacity to do everything that I would like to, and I'm not able to do this anymore. Then I went to list 2 And I didn't want to just completely resign because I didn't want to close doors for the future. But I sent a letter and I said, you know what, I really enjoy doing this. It's something I really care about. But right now I don't have the capacity to do everything I want, so I'm going to step away. I would love to stay engaged, and in the future I hope there's opportunities for me to get more involved again, but right now is just not the right time. And then what that did is it left me list one. It left me the things that really mattered most to me. And I was able to spend my time and energy focusing on the things that really mattered to me. So what was on my list one? My family. I had learned very much that my family was critically important to me, and I wasn't giving them enough time and energy. And so as I said, I bought a cabin because I realized that spending quality time with my family is something that I need to prioritize. My own health, I had never taken good care of myself. And after that, I realized that in order for me to achieve things, I need to live a longer life. And so I needed to make my own health a priority. And then there were two organizations that I had been very involved in that were very near and dear to my heart, and the AAS was one of those. I was secretary of the organization at that time, and I had been on the executive council for many years, and I was on the path to be the presidency, and I didn't want to give that up. And I didn't want to give it up not because I wanted to be here as president, but because I am so passionate about what this organization represented, and I wanted the opportunity to continue to serve it. And the other organization is the AAS, which is our endocrine surgery organization, because I am an endocrine surgeon at heart, and that's what my true passion is, and anything I could do to help support that organization is something that I very much wanted to do. The other thing was my R01 grant and my clinical trial. Again, that trial is not about the funding, it is about, it was a clinical question that I really think needed an answer, and I worked so hard. I think it took me 4 years to get that funded. And I enrolled and randomized my very first patient exactly 1 week before I left for Australia for that trip. So it had just started. I had literally just randomized the first patient, and I just couldn't back away or give up. And so I wanted to make sure that I could see that project through to completion. And the other thing that was on this list was the Endocrine Surgery Fellowship. I think when we started it, I started it because I love to educate, and I was passionate about it, and I wanted to share that. But what I don't think I appreciated is how important that would become to me. My fellows here, I asked them to sit in the family section because they are my family. Like, these fellows are my everything, and I think that they're probably the greatest joy that I get in my day-to-day job is to try to help and inspire and develop these young surgeons. So what happened when I got rid of list 2s and 3s? What it did is I was focusing on a lot less, but what I found is that even though I had less capacity, I actually accomplished a lot more. And I accomplished a lot more because I was focusing on less at one time. And I think that was a very profound moment for me to realize is that there is a trick to being successful, and sometimes when we're overcommitted and overextending ourselves, we're really losing the focus on the things that really are important, and we're not focusing our time and energy where we should. The other effect is that I was happy. I was happier than I had been in a long time. I had sort of lost that joy in what I was doing every day. And once I stopped doing so much and really started focusing on the things I cared most about, I found so much more satisfaction and joy in my job. And I found that I think I had a greater impact. You know, you can do a job and meet expectations, or you can do a job and you can make it better. And I wanted to do things that when I left, that people said that because I did it, that maybe things were a little bit better. And I think that that's what I allowed myself to do when I was focusing on less. So my lesson from all of this is that if we all do a little bit less, it actually is more. And that we can have a much greater impact if we stop focusing on quantity, but focusing more on the quality of what we do. You know, one of the things that was hard for me in this process is that list 3 of resigning from things, because I'm really one of those people who wants to follow through with commitments. I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And so I had to send those letters, and I felt horrible about it. You know what I found, though, is that when I sent those letters resigning, is that as much as I was resigning, what I was really doing is saying that I need more time to commit to list 1. So it wasn't that I was giving up things. When I committed to doing things that were not on my, list 1, all I was doing is taking time and energy and focus away from the things that I really should be committed to at this stage of my career. The other thing that I found is that when I gave it up, it opened the door for somebody else. And so that opportunity was created. And in so many of those positions that I resigned from, somebody else was given that opportunity. And for somebody else, that opportunity was on their list one. And they accomplished more at that opportunity than I ever would have done, and I had done it. So what I realized is that this model of trying to do it all, we're not only hurting ourselves and taking our focus away from where we should be focusing, but we're also taking opportunities away from other people in the room. And I would say that every person in this room has untapped potential. And what we need to do as leaders is to stop trying to take all those opportunities, but start creating opportunities for everyone else in the room. You know, I think when we measure success in academic surgery, we unfortunately still very much are on this quality versus quantity debate. You know, I've applied for the societies, and it's the size of my CV, the number of publications, how many grants I've got, how many officer positions I've held. And those are metrics, and they're numeric, but they don't say anything about the impact that you had in any of those contributions. I know people who've had a lot of those titles or a lot of those things, but haven't actually accomplished anything. And I wish that we could figure out some way to measure success in academic surgery that wasn't simply on the numbers of what we accomplished, but instead on the impact that we had in each of those roles, or what difference that publication made to how we actually care for patients. I have a question for you. What if everyone in this room focused on what they were really passionate about? If we all capitalized on our individual strengths and we all decided to do a little bit less, but just do it that much better, what do you think would happen? And I would say that we would move this field forward so much further than it has in the past. Because if we could harness the energy and the capabilities of everyone in this room, we will have such a greater impact. I think the future of academic surgery is very bright. But the way that it's going to be bright is if we really stop trying to consolidate all the opportunities to a few select individuals, but instead really tap all of the untapped potential and figure out what their passions are and what their motivations are, and try to harness that energy to help us to make some meaningful changes. I give you all permission today to do less, but do it better. So, as I've gone through this process, you know, I have to think back at my career, and I have to think back about things that have happened and mistakes I maybe made and things I wish I knew. And I think one of the things that was very clear to me is that I never asked myself what was important. You know, until I had this epiphany, I don't think I ever really thought about what I really cared about or what was important or what I should be prioritizing. I think the other thing that I did is I was so focused on making other people happy and meeting expectations that I never asked myself, what do I want to do? What's important to me? What do I care? You know, I was just so worried about doing a good job and being the one who gets it done. I never really thought about who am I and what do I care for. I really didn't feel like I ever established a self-identity. The other thing that I did is I never really thought about my values, and until you know what they are, you cannot prioritize them. You know, the values are very core to who we are. We all have those, and unless you think about what your values are and then figure out how you can prioritize those in your day-to-day work, you're never going to end up having a fulfilled life. So what do I value? It became very clear to me that I value quality. You know, I am committed to providing the highest quality care, and that's illustrated in everything I do. I don't want to just be a surgeon. I want to be the best surgeon. I want every patient to have the best possible outcome. I want to help to establish what the best practices are for our field so that everybody can provide the best possible care. And I want to make the experience the best for the patients, not just from a satisfaction, but the whole experience as far as their education and their preparation and sort of understanding what they're going through. I value teamwork and collaboration. I am not a competitive person. I don't like being in a cutthroat environment where people are trying to one-up each other or compete against each other. I want to be in an environment where everyone works together, that we have a shared vision and mission, and we're going to try to accomplish it together. And I'm so lucky to have these three amazing partners to work with every day, because they understand that trait is important to me, and they work together with me every day to accomplish that mission. And I think in addition to my surgeons is that our team is part of a nursing staff, and our nurse practitioner are critical components of that. And I recognize that every person of that team is just as important. And if they don't understand what we're trying to do and they don't understand their role, then we're never going to be successful. So I think part of what I have found in my job is that I need to have this team and that they all need to be working together. I also value positive thinking. Anybody who knows me is I'm definitely a glass half full type of person. I think things happen to us and we can't necessarily change what happens to us, but we can change the lens that we look at it or how we frame it. And I think that we always have to try to look at the upside of things. I think everything happens for a reason, and that reason can cause change. And sometimes it hurts and sometimes it's hard, but in the end it's all for the best. And so I encourage you all, when things happen, to not look at the negatives, to not try to put things down, but to try to focus on what is the potential upside or what's the positive spin on it. So the other thing that I have learned through this process is that the road to change is not easy. I had an epiphany after that accident. I had made some really great strides, but it is so easy to fall back into old habits. And very quickly, I find myself going back right down into that same path that I was a few years ago. So I've realized is that this is not a one-time process. It's not like you can just say, oh, I'm going to change and everything's going to be magically better now. But this is really an iterative process, and that you constantly have to reassess, that you have to keep coming back to, again, what are my priorities, what are my goals, and reassess that so you're constantly making changes and decisions that are prioritizing your values. And things may change. Things that I thought were really important 5 years ago maybe aren't anymore. And so it's also important to sort of reassess it because that's always changing. So where am I now? I'd like to say, and probably most of you think, I'm back to normal, I'm the old Becky. I'd like to believe it. I'm not 100%. My last evaluation declared that at this stage it'll probably be a permanent disability. I'm mostly recovered. For a year, I'm pretty normal, but it's certainly not what I was before. And I've accepted that. Sometimes being what we were before maybe isn't what we should have been. And so just because I'm not exactly the same person, I don't think that means that I can't still have an impact. It's just that the impact I have might be slightly different. So I really like this quote when I found it. Everything happens for a reason, and sometimes good things fall apart so better things can come. I am not on the exact same career path that I was 4 years ago prior to that accident. I'm on a very different path right now, but I'd like to believe that the path I'm on now is even better. And I guess what I'd like you all to do is to think about what do you want that path in your life to look like, and make sure that you're on the right path and it's taking where you want to go. So how can I make an impact? I would say, I mentioned earlier, this fellowship is something that is very near and dear to my heart. And I don't think I appreciated when I started it just how much it would mean to me. But I really think that the ability to train and educate the next generation of surgeons is something that's a really powerful thing. Because I can only care for a small number of patients, but if I can train these surgeons and they can go out and start practices and train the next generation of surgeons, I can magnify the impact and really have a true impact in improving care for patients. So it is my greatest contribution to academic surgery is to help develop and inspire these young leaders who I hope will all surpass me in their careers and accomplish great things for our field. The other thing that I want to do is I want to do research that helps to improve care. As I mentioned earlier, everyone has different drives that make them do research. I don't do research because I like the methodology or I understand the statistics. I do research because it helps to answer clinically important questions. Every day in clinic, somebody asks me a question, and if I don't know the answer, then I say that's my responsibility to figure it out. If I'm supposed to be the expert, then you shouldn't have questions that I don't know the answer to. And so most of the studies that we do are really triggered by patients telling us there's something that they want to know, and I figure out that's our obligation to try to solve it. Some of those projects are large scale and require NIH funding, but some of them are small scale. But the key with everything that I've tried to do is that it has a direct impact on patient care. Everything and every decision I make every day in my practice is based on research that I've done. So, I come to this sort of epiphany because I kind of had a life-altering event. And it's allowed me to sort of change the lens at which I've looked at the world. Now, I don't want anyone in the room to have to go through what I've done to get to that point, but I do think that that point was incredibly valuable to me. And what I'd like to do is provide the opportunity for everyone in this room to have that aha moment, to give them a chance to just stop and reflect and really think about what they're doing and how they could make changes to help move things forward. You know, I think life is short, and it is important that we do stuff that matters. I think too often we're thinking about, 10 steps ahead, that I'll be happy when I get here, I'll be successful. If I meet this, I'll be. You know what? Those things may not happen. What you need to do is focus on today. What are you doing today? And are you making the most of today? Are you enjoying what you are doing? Are you passionate about what you're doing? Do you feel like today is live to the best of your ability? And I think that we need to change the focus from future directed to really living in the moment and making the most. And most importantly, make sure that we are doing a lot more of what makes us happy. So when you're looking to sort of define what is success in academic surgery, I don't want you to chase someone else's definition of success. I think that you shouldn't let others define success for you. You need to find your own definition. I found this, like a quote from Maya Angelou: success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. And I would say that if you and all in this room can meet those 3 goals, then I would say that you have defined success in academic surgery. You know, yesterday when I heard Taylor's presidential address, I thought, wow, our talks are very similar. We have different paths to sort of discovery, but so many of the messages that we have are the same. And I thought, well, maybe this is a bad idea because it's going to be very redundant. And then I thought, maybe not. Maybe they are going to be complementary. Maybe there is a reason why Taylor and I are president of these organizations at the same time, and that we are both standing on this stage because we both were taking the traditional path of success in academic surgery to get here, and both of us, by the time we've gotten to this stage, has come to the realization that maybe it's time for change. And so my hope is that there is a reason we're both here today, and that we, as a field of surgery, are maybe ready to start making changes, to start looking, not that we don't want to acknowledge our past and acknowledge where we've come from, but to recognize that the power of the future is in our hands. And it is up to those of us in this individual to help us define what the future of surgery looks like and what the future of success in academic surgery looks like. So it is my hope that we leave today and we all think about the changes we can make and how we value things, that we can start to make a field that is more sustainable and fulfilled for everyone here in this room. I think the future of academic surgery looks incredibly bright, and I'm hoping that with our talks and with the theme of this meeting, that we can inspire all of you to help us get there. I want to thank a few people. I wanted to talk. It's come out very clearly that part of why I'm at Wisconsin is the culture, and I say that I still love being part of the University of Wisconsin. I'm thrilled to have our new chairman, Dr. Minter, join us, and I think she has understood since arriving the value of being at that institution and the culture that we've created. I have so many amazing faculty that I get a chance to work with every day, and I am thrilled to have the opportunity to be part of this amazing team. Today, my hope is that I would raise awareness and just get you all thinking about things. But I figured that's step 1. If I just sort of get you thinking about it, but then I don't actually give you any tools to help you move it forward, then I really haven't done my job. And so today we've set up a presidential session that'll be at 1 o'clock in this room today. And what I've done is I've asked 2 professional coaches to come, and they're gonna help us walk through some actual tools that you could use to help you to understand what are your values, what are your priorities, and how are you gonna live a more fulfilled life. And so I encourage you all, if you're inspired in even the least, to come back to that session at 1 o'clock to help go through that self-discovery. As part of that, I've asked 7 AAS council members to come, and they've gone through the tools, and they're going to share their own insights and experiences and what they've learned through this process as well. I think it's going to be a really amazing session, and I hope you all join us at 1 o'clock for that today. The other thing I want to do is I want to thank some few people. I want to thank the people in the front row, which are here to support me today. My husband, Ryan, my boys, Aiden and Gavin, my parents, my mom, Kathy, and her husband, John. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing this with me. I think when we choose a career in surgery, we know there's a lot of sacrifices and we're willing to take it on. But the problem is the people around us also take on pretty huge sacrifices. And sometimes they don't get the rewards they need for doing that. And so I just want to acknowledge them and thank them for all the support that they've given to get me here today. I want to thank my mom for being my biggest cheerleader and supporter throughout my entire life, and allowing me to see that no matter where I was from or what I wanted to do, that anything was possible. Even when I was down on myself, she was always the one who sort of helped me get back on track and realized that I had something to contribute. So I'm incredibly grateful for that. And John, thank you for being such a wonderful spouse to her and providing her such happiness and for being such a good support for our family. There are a few people that are not here today that I also wanted to acknowledge. Got mentioned earlier, my brother Dennis is a pharmacist. I was probably the annoying little sister to Dennis, but he was always a big supporter of me and incredibly encouraging. And I'm incredibly grateful for him because he is the reason I'm standing here today. I started in pharmacy school because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. And he was the one who came to me and said, Becky, this isn't what you should be doing. You're capable of more, and I really think you should go to medical school. It's probably the best advice he ever gave me. And I'm just really grateful that for once in my life, I actually followed his advice. So thank you to him. I also want to acknowledge my dad, who's not able to be with us today. As I said earlier, my dad was ill, and he unfortunately passed away about 5 years ago. He was incredibly supportive of me and very encouraging of me in my path to pursue surgery. And I know if he were here today, he would be sitting in the front row. He wouldn't say much because he was very quiet, but he would be beaming because he would be so proud of what I've accomplished today. So thank you, Dad. I also want to acknowledge in particular those two little boys who look so handsome in their suits today. Looking good. Aiden and Gavin, thank you so much for bringing such meaning to my life. You are such an amazing little boys, and I am so proud of you. Every day you continue to amaze me on what you accomplish and what you're capable of, and you are just genuinely two of the nicest and sweetest people I have ever met. I am so proud of you, and I am so proud that I am your mother. And I would say that if I think about me making an impact in my career, my greatest impact is that I brought the two of you into this world because you guys are going to accomplish amazing things. So I'm so proud of you. Of course, probably the reason that you are so amazing, is not because of me, but because of the man who's sitting next to you. Ryan, my husband, we have been together 24 years. It is a long time. I can't even remember a life when you weren't part of it. And you have been so incredibly supportive of me. And you have done so much to raise such amazing children and to support me in my career and my endeavors. And so many times I've come to you and I've asked advice, and you know what's important to me, and you know what I care about, and you always say yes. So thank you so much for all the sacrifices and commitments that you have made to allow me to achieve what I am. I would not be here today if it weren't for you. And so really, I think you should be on the stage today because this accomplishment has a lot less to do with me, but it has a lot more to do with you and all the support you've given to get me here today. So thank you. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to come to the session today, and I hope I've been able to impart a little bit of wisdom, and that as I shared my story today, that you can all take at least a small piece of that and leave this auditorium and think about changes that you might make so that we can all help to work together to shape the future of academic surgery. Thank you.